Sharing with us his insights on the proposed Maharlika Wealth Fund is University of the Philippines School of Economics Professor Renato Reside. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. We just heard the economic managers, they're divided on the proposed Maharlika Wealth Fund. Which side are you taking? Are you for or against it?
Good evening, Rico. Good evening also to your viewing audience. There are apprehensions that have been aired about the bill, and I think it's good that legislators be open to them. No, I particularly am supportive of Bangko Sentral governor's the Bangko Sentral governor's position that the BSP the reserves be left untouched by the fund. No?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that the BSP right now is facing headwinds, no? in its monetary operations. So it's good that they have enough resources. No?
So,
beyond
Professor,
that, no,
Professor, I
think,
wanted to find out from you, why the haste in creating this fund now? Why are they fast-tracking it? What are we really trying to achieve here?
Yeah, well, they did mention that in an environment where returns tend to be low for the investments that, for example, GSIS is putting their money in, they don't get too much of a return. No? So I think that's part of the motivating reasons, no? For putting up the fund. No? Ben Jokno also mentioned it, no? that in the times that our foreign reserves, for example, were $110 billion, interest rates were also very low. No? So I think it's the search for high returns.
Yeah, but high returns also translates into higher risk, Professor.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So there's no argument from me. I think when you look at sovereign wealth funds, no, some of the preconditions for establishing them also have to be scrutinized. No? So some of wealth funds, a lot of the wealth funds I have read about in the past few days have also been established because there are surplus funds, no, from the government that might be nice to invest them. No? But when you look at our country, you might want to ask the question: where is the surplus? No?
There's no surplus.
We have a budget deficit.
That's right.
We're not running trade surpluses either. No, so maybe the preconditions might not be there. So maybe the government might be a little bit more careful in setting up the fund if it really wishes to do so.
Professor.
Also,
Professor.
Yes.
Professor, I'd like to jump in. You mentioned about the deficit. We have a trade deficit. We have a budget deficit. We're in debt of more than $13 trillion. If you compare us to the likes of Norway and Singapore, the wealth funds come from surplus revenues of the Norwegian petroleum sector and surplus from Singapore investments in trade. So where are we going to get the money? We're going to put the money of the people at risk here.
On the other hand, they did say naman that they were trying to put safeguards into the bill. No, but beyond that, no, even though that is the case, no, our country really doesn't have a very good history of, well, for one, taking savings out of SSS and GSIS in the past and then putting them to use in other purposes. No? So they might want to study past instances where that has happened, and our government has been left in a bind. No, so
I mean,
so governance issues. No?
The history of fund management
first.
The history of fund management, Professor, is riddled with mismanagement and scandals. You have the Coco Levy, PhilHealth scandal, and SSS funds being used for politically tainted stock purchases. I mean, where is the positive performance here?
Yeah.
And then we have this Maharlika Wealth Fund, which is worth 275 billion pesos.
Yeah, so I guess the bill and its sponsors really have to address those issues, no? Because finance is all about trust, no? So you also said it correctly, no? I mean, the whole thing about setting up this fund is making it trustworthy. So
Yeah.
are there enough mechanisms in the bill to make it as trustworthy as possible?
And you say trustworthy is a very key word there, Professor, because this wealth fund will be managed by a 15-person board. No, can they be trusted? Because majority of them are appointed by the president and his companions.
Well, I think that remains to be seen. No? If they're going to set up the fund, I think I'd probably rather comment on the credibility of the fund also after, if they indeed pass the bill. No? So I think it remains to be seen. But they do have to kind of go and address lingering issues with respect to credibility and trustworthiness, because there are past instances of funds misuse, especially coming out of the contractual savings system.
And some critics are also saying, Professor, that this fund in the long run may try to salvage bankrupt businesses of friends and cronies, just like what happened in the past. What do you say to that?
Well, I certainly hope that that doesn't happen. These are things that will make the credibility of the fund worse, not better. So, I hope that doesn't happen. So I hope if the fund gets established, it really comports itself in the highest possible standards.
There are
standards.
some people who are even saying, instead of tapping workers' funds for this sovereign wealth fund, why not tax billionaires and use their money for the Maharlika Investment Fund? Your thoughts?
Well, that has been floated actually. That's a wealth tax. There are also some issues with respect to the wealth tax. No, for example, if you tax only the wealthy, or if you tax them too much, they also have mobile capital. No, so I think one has to really think of the overall context of all of this. No, for example, what is the alternative use of what would happen if we just kept the funds at GSIS and Land Bank, for example, and DBP? They would be loaned out. Probably, DBP would loan it out, Land Bank would loan it out.
Yes.
So if you kind of take these funds away from them, where will they go? They will go to whatever the sovereign wealth funds wants to put them in. So if, for example, LBP and DBP are serving farmers or small entrepreneurs, you might take funds away from them, for example, that would have flowed to them. So these could be, so thinking about it that way could serve to guide also legislators. These things are thinking like an economist, thinking about opportunity costs of putting the funds in an alternative institution where they were originally
This fund indeed,
intended to be.
Professor, has to be studied and scrutinized to its core, because this has to benefit the Filipino people. Thank you so much for joining us, UP School of Economics Professor Renato Reside.